So we have to try and understand human behavior in order to try and help AI become a better companion to us.
Welcome to ChatRog, the podcast on ethics in artificial intelligence. I'm Roger Steer, the corporate philosopher and ethicist, and today I'm joined by Oliver Sweet, head of ethnography at the global market research and public opinion company IPSOS. We'll be asking, what can studying human behavior teach us about making AI more ethical and more human? Ollie, welcome to ChatRog. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Let's dive straight in, Ollie. Can you tell us about your role at IPSOS and how it relates to AI?
Yeah, certainly. So many people might know Ipsos as a large and innovative market research company, which it really is. I'd say most of its work is done around understanding public and consumer opinion. So we ask lots of surveys, we ask lots of questions, we get lots of answers. We have a large division that also does lots of qualitative research as well. So asking people in focus groups and interviews and online more about why people do what they're doing. And then my little team at the end of Ipsos is sort of even more qualitative than that, in that I have a team of business anthropologists. So we try and use the principles of anthropology and ethnography to go and find out why people do the things that they do, often from an unspoken perspective, so from a cultural perspective as well. What that means in practice is that we go and hang out with people and we follow people where they go and we have conversations with people in the places where they make decisions. And we do this all around the world. And we, as anthropologists, we try to apply the principles or ideas around culture and understanding culture to try and figure out why people do those things. So many of the reasons we do things are for cultural reasons, because other people do them, because I was brought up like that, because I have, a moral imperative to do it. A lot of the time, we like to think that a lot of that comes from who we are as individuals, our personality. But in actual fact, a lot of the time, it's a cultural thing. So I've been doing this for nearly 20 years now, mostly at Ipsos as well. And as AI has come into existence, first of all, I think when AI first landed, we thought, wow, this is a question for software engineers to understand what's going on in language. And actually, slowly over time, we realized that the social sciences have a very important role to play in AI because of the way that we are interacting with AI like it is a human, but it is not a human. So we have to try and understand human behavior in order to try and help AI become a sort of better companion to us. Obviously, it feels a little bit like the Wild West. Where is AI going to go? How are we going to use it? Well, a lot of those answers are in the hands of software engineers and they are in the hands of big tech companies. But I'm not sure they're always the best placed people to answer those questions. I think that anthropologists, psychologists, and many of the other people who've got good understanding of the social sciences are actually very well placed to do it. So me and my team have started to explore AI, how we interact with AI, and what that means for our behavior in the future.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful. One of the things that you and I should be interested in is how big technology companies are actually saying we need fewer software engineers and more experts in the humanities and the social sciences. So I think the work that you're doing and some of the work I'm doing around the morality and ethics of AI are a good thing. A good thing. But let's just go a bit further. What first made you interested in how technology and ethics intersect?
I mean, I think that for me, everything is an ethical question. So I have a view on culture, which is really essentially there's three ways of kind of breaking down culture, to be honest, in quite an accessible way. There are many anthropologists out there who have wonderful definitions of what culture is. and are very accurate and very clever. But I'm a business anthropologist, so I need to make it accessible to everyone else, which is not necessarily what the academic anthropologists do. So I have a way of breaking culture down into three big things. One is that it helps form your identity. So who I am as a British white man has come from the culture that I've been brought up in, and it has actually shaped who I am in terms of my identity, how I want to look, how I want to talk, how I want others to perceive me. It's very important. The second really important part of culture for me is community. So how do peers talk to one another? What are interactions like, both online and offline? How does language develop? How do conversations develop? So that has a very immediate and obvious application to technology because so many of our conversations are mediated by technology. And the way that those conversations are mediated changes us as individuals. We can see that through social media as an obvious example, whereby, our interactions online are different to our interactions face to face. We can go into some of those things. But the third part of culture, which I think is almost the most important part, is the belief systems that we are brought up with. So we believe that certain things are important. We have values that are important, and that might be some of those values might be about helping family. They might be helping strangers, or it might be about looking after yourself, right? There's no right or wrong answer there. We're brought up with a set of values. So anything that we do has an underlying ethical sort of drive to it, in my opinion. And there's several ways of looking at belief systems. It can be through values. There are many ways to measure values. They're all very interesting. And once you start looking into values, you start to see that, wow, I really am quite individualistic. I like to think that I'm quite collectivist in my behaviors, but really not at all. We might realize that we're quite forthright rather than sort of open to listening. We might realize many, many different things to our values. And none of these things are a right and wrong way. It's just how we are, and they become ethical questions. So the more and more we look into how technology becomes sort of part of our lives, the more and more these become ethical questions. I've got a book that's going to come out in February, and there's a chapter on it, which is essentially how we are cyborgs. We really in science fiction, cyborgs have captured everyone's imagination, and they've mostly captured people's imagination because an adaptation to our body or our mind has given us this sort of superhuman edge that other normal humans, non-cyborg, have. But it's also kind of like a cheat. And it can also go wrong. You've got Darth Vader, for example, who is essentially kept alive so that he can practice the dark arts. And there's lots of other sort of examples of cyborgs, like RoboCop was supposed to be a good one, but it was always a problem that he could go wrong. There really isn't much difference now between us in the way that we operate on a daily level in daily life with being a cyborg, right? We are so heavily dependent on technology that we can't actually complete a task. I have kind of forgotten how to drive around London because of SatNav. I used to know the routes. I don't anymore. I've outsourced it. I can't really contact many people without technology. I recently did a project for a big technology company. What we do is we go and talk to people and understand how they live. And one of the things that we asked people to do, so I think we had about 60 people around the world in 5 different countries. And we said to them, right, we want you to not use technology for a week. So digital exclusion. You can only pick up your phone if it rings, and you can only use text messaging. You can't use any other apps on your phone. You can use your computer if you need to work, but you really and we wanted to basically see what it was like not to live with technology. And there are many sort of shocks to the system that people have. Then people acclimatize, and then when you give them their technology back, they realize that they didn't need some of it. But fundamentally, there were so many things that people didn't realize that they couldn't do anymore. And everybody in that study, everybody cracked at some point. Everybody cracked. And what it was there to do was to show us how how technology is helpful. So it's very helpful on a practical level. So that's why we might describe ourselves as a cyborg. I can now travel much more easily. I can do my banking on the go. I can be more financially savvy, blah, blah, blah. Very practical things. There's a whole bunch of emotional things as well, um, about staying in touch with people in this very, very busy world. One finding that I thought was really lovely, that is surprising but also intuitive, is that the people who missed social media the most, particularly Instagram, were the older generations, not the younger. So the younger generations, they missed TikTok and Instagram immediately. They're like, oh my God, this is terrible. And then they realized after a week that they could live without it. And actually the opportunity cost of doing something else instead of spending 3 hours on TikTok was enormous. But actually the older generation couldn't keep in touch with their kids, with their cousins, with their family abroad. And actually, we know that there is a loneliness epidemic thriving amongst older people in the world. And actually, social media plays a really important role in keeping people connected. So there is huge emotional elements to being a cyborg these days, which I think is part of, and it helps with human flourishing, right? So it's not, when I say we're sort of moving towards this cyborg nature, it helps us. We are becoming, it helps us with human flourishing.
This is fascinating. And I hadn't really thought about the analogy of cyborg and the fact that we are all cyborgs. And if I guess from a technology point of view, that goes right back to early hominins when our ancestors harnessed fire. There's no other species that's done that. Other species use tools. So primates use sticks to get ants out of ant hills, magpies use tools, etc., etc. But fire is something that's unique to us. And perhaps that was the start of us becoming cyborgs. Just to pause on this point, because I think it's really important. So our interaction with technology goes back a long, long way. How do you think that has shaped our morality? I mean, you've said that, there are a number of different moral systems that exist in the world today and have been for some time. But how do you think that technology has impacted the customs, the mores that shape our communities and influence our behaviors in groups?
It's a very good question. I'll do a small juxtaposition because, like you say, we have been living with tools and technology for a long, long time. I'm very interested in culture and how cultures change. So I focus on the ones that might change our cultures in slightly more, slightly larger ways. So I think that, you know, forms of technology of transport, bicycles, cars, and aeroplanes and ships. I think that form of technology changed our insular outlook on life. So when we were able to first travel to new countries, we could see that there were, other ways of living, very other ways, completely different ways of living. Right. So when we went to Australia, we we discovered that the Aboriginals didn't own land, and that you're seeing a very kind of stark moral sort of juxtaposition there. You've got sort of white settlers who are coming there to going, right, this is my farmland. Yours is over there, mine is here. And you have the Aboriginals walking through going, no, we have lines in which we walk down. And that butt up against each other. And that's not, it didn't end well in a nice story, but it's a very interesting point about how travel changes morality and it changes your values. And I think that, the rise in international travel has led to people's moral outlook being expanded and people becoming largely more accepting of different cultures and different ways of living. But I think that so that's a fascinating form of technology that changes our moral outlook. And I think one large way in which you can change your ethical viewpoint or change your way of thinking is the level of interconnectedness you have with people who are different to you, because it makes you challenges your own assumptions, and sometimes you might double down on those assumptions, and sometimes you might go, maybe this isn't the right way to think. So those kinds of things, that is very important. Where I think this differs, where I think AI is a step change, is because a lot of technology to date has affected one dimension of morality. So interconnectedness with travel, or medication is another great example, which has challenged our sense of mortality. Right? It enabled us to live longer, and we are able to think and act in different ways, and the way that we live life, the milestones change. Right? But all of those things challenge one part of morality. What AI is doing is it's trying to mimic the whole lot. Right? It is trying to be a human brain, which is why it's got to tread very carefully, because there is no one human brain. And we know that a lot of the large language models have been trained on very Western centric literature. And we know that it is therefore reflected back at us in AI as well, that it comes back with quite a Western centric view of the world and Western centric sense of morality. One of the things that we were doing as part of this same study, where we did some digital exclusion for the technology company, is that we were trying to map out on a global sense what helpfulness meant. So an AI company really, really wants to be helpful, right? If one AI company is more helpful than the other, it's probably going to be a more useful, more used AI. So they were trying to own this space of helpfulness. And what they wanted to do was map helpfulness in different countries. But the way that you express help and ask for help and accept help is quite different around the world. So we went to Brazil, for example, and where it's very well established that you will go and just give help without that person asking. You will turn up at someone's door because you know that they're ill, and you'll turn up with a pie, or you'll turn up with some food, or you'll turn up to see how they're getting on. You won't ask. Help is not necessarily about being asked for. Help is given. Help is given. In India, we saw help as almost like a command. Because we are close, I can almost demand help from you. Okay, so I'm not feeling that great. Can you just go to the shops and pick up this and this, right? That's totally acceptable. Whether in the UK and the US to a large degree as well, you don't want to give help to someone that hasn't asked, because you're being intrusive, right? And being intrusive is not a good quality. So we're seeing helpfulness as something that is quite different around the world, and how helpful you are is part of your moral code. Is how it's how you want to be set up. So it changes a lot around the world, but we know that AI is currently focused on quite you have to go and give it a command, and you'll see in pretty much all the LLMs, you ask for something, it gives it to you, and then often it will just give you one line at the end. Would you like me to do anything else? Would you like me to do this? Would you like me to do that? Well, actually, there are plenty of places around the world where they'll look at that and go, why are you even asking? Just do it. So it's so that form of helpfulness, and I think these technology companies are starting to think about it, but it's not based on it. It's not programmed in from the very core.
Thank you. That's fascinating. And I had never thought of helpfulness in the way that you just described it. Before we move on, I just want to dwell on one thing, which is that we've both been around the world and met lots of different people in different ways. I'm not an anthropologist, I'm a philosopher. But one of the things that I have noticed is that as well as all these differences between tribes, there are some universal human truths. So we're a highly social animal, although there are individuals who don't like being part of the group. But there are a set of moral norms that are essential for the way we have and raise children. There are a set of norms and taboos. There are a set of norms and taboos about what friendship is or means, although there's variations. So I'm just wondering, this isn't a challenge at all, it's just a question, whether or not you think that AI, as if you like, this mirror, as Shannon Valor called it, the AI mirror on humanity, it's currently, as you say, got a Western bias. But do you think it could be good for us because it actually gives a truer picture of who we are, both in terms of our differences and in terms of universal truths about what it means to be human?
I like that. I like that premise and that idea. And let's not beat about in the bush. I mean, AI is phenomenally smart and clever. Right? It can do so many things. I always have this phrase that I used a couple of years back when they started. You could start to do AI art. And I went to an AI art exhibition. And excuse my language, but it works very well. Is that I went around it and I said that basically it's not as shit as you'd like it to be. It's just like you want art to be the purest form of human expression. And actually AI is doing a pretty good job. It's not good enough yet, but it's doing a pretty good job. And it's constantly developing, constantly getting better. So I do agree. I think a lot of it depends on the context. So you're right to point out things like, friendships that they're different. One thing that has been quite well documented is using AI as a therapist. Right. So a lot of people are turning to, and I've got a bit of a passage about this in my book, which is a lot of people are turning to AI for sort of trying for therapy. And I have a case study of someone I know quite well who went through a terrible breakup, an emotional breakup, and he already had OCD and he already had a lot of anxiety, and he'd seen therapists in the past, but this breakup really just crushed him. It was really, really, really bad. And he went back to a therapist. He was still pacing around his apartment. He just couldn't handle it. And one point at night, he just uploaded a voice note to ChatGPT and decided he was going to start interacting with ChatGPT as a therapist. And he was using it as voice notes. So he would use a voice note to upload, but it still felt like a talking therapy because the way you type and the way you speak is different. So he would upload voice notes, and ChatGPT would respond, and it would learn more about him, and he would then ask it to cross-reference against certain literature. So he said, go and look up, what would a psychodynamic approach be? Please avoid any CBT. I've done CBT before. It's not really my style. And the AI learned. And after a while, the AI would sort of say to him, you sound like you're doing better these days. Your responses are more positive. And then sometimes they would say, you seem like you're spiraling at the moment. Has something else happened? And actually, because it was there 24/7, because it had no bias, because he could always access it, it was incredible. It was really utterly life-changing for him, utterly life-changing for him. And he still uses it, and it's been far better than any therapist. But the reason I use this story is because I think that because the LLMs have been trained on a largely Western-centric cognitive model that where there's a lot of literature about therapy, it can do it well. So therefore, it's able to be a good therapist because it knows the literature and it understands it and it's been responsive. Compare that. So as you've got AI therapy, which I think it does quite well. Compare that to AI companions, which is another thing that's taking off a lot. They seem quite similar on the surface of it. One goes a bit deeper, maybe. But companionship is actually fundamentally different to therapy. Companionship has a whole set of other interactions which aren't nearly as subservient as a therapist. So a therapy is you have a master-servant relationship, whether you like it or not. A good therapist will challenge you, sure, but it's still there. A companion should always be, it should be a dance of equals. It should be a way of interacting where you can play, you can have fun. You might misinterpret. You might not care. You might decide that that's boring and you want to talk about something else. An AI companion, and I've tried this as part of AI experiments, they're so subservient. They just create this thing of like, oh, I'm fine, but I really want to know about you. How are you feeling today? Have you had a wonderful day? What could we do together that would make you happy? It's slightly sickening. I had to delete it eventually. Um,
Mm.
and again, I've written about this, but what I think the AI companions are doing is that they're feeding through the same literature, through the same psychological literature that is out there. They are feeding your ego. And when a companion, a friend, is just there to feed your ego, I think we run into some real problems. And I think that one of the things that scares me about the interactions that humans have with AI is that we have the potential to go down a rabbit hole of digital narcissism.
Mm.
And the AI will just start feeding our egos more and more and more. And I've certainly seen that with AI.
Yeah, that's a great point. We've had other guests who've talked about the danger of AI companions, this stoking of narcissism, this sycophantic behavior, which can, at its worst, it has resulted in suicides, which is awful, which is awful. So let's just think for a moment a bit more about how AI learns from data about people. And the obvious question is, does it actually really understand us, or is it doing something else?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that there has to be a bit of a question, which is, do people really understand us?
Great answer. Love it.
But I qualify that with that I have a greater level of trust in a person knowing me because I think they have a greater level of motivation to know me and a greater level of care. And I think and the motivation of a good friend knowing me, I think is real and I think it's inquisitive and I think it's out of love and care. Whether I don't think that's the motivation for an AI to know me. um, so I think that there is, I would trust a human, a good friend to know me better than AI. But there are certain things it can learn about me and there are certain things it can't learn about me. And it's it's very language based, isn't it? So it's going to
It is.
understand things that I say to it, and it's not going to understand things that I don't say to it.
It won't understand tone of voice. It won't understand the expression on your face. Not yet, anyway. Especially if you're interacting through a keyboard. So I totally get that, Ollie. So from that question and answer, where do you see the biggest ethical risks when AI systems learn, in quotes, from human behavior?
My biggest concern is definitely around feeding our ego and driving a sense of narcissism because there's consequences there. And I've got one sort of or two worrying consequences there. But I think that so my backdrop to all of this as an anthropologist is that I believe that that psychology has been given greater airtime in anthropology and we focus a lot more on cognition about what we think rather than on culture, which is what connects us.
Mm.
And if you take the literature over the last, there's some total of all the literature out there on the internet and beyond. A lot more weight is given to human cognition than it is to culture. Therefore, the models are more focused on cognition and they are more focused on you as an individual rather than us as a group, which is why I fear for this kind of narcissistic realm. So I work in the world of business. I'm a business anthropologist and I try and look at the applications of AI as well. So I can imagine a world quite easily where you're online enough that that your digital footprint says an awful lot about who you are. It says a huge amount about who you are. What's more is we will also be moving into the world of what's called personal AI. We all have our own AI that we subscribe to in time, not that far away, to be honest. We may well have some kind of gadget, a brooch, a watch, or something that listens to all of us and it starts to act on our behalf as well. So instead of us emailing back and forward and having a chat back and forward about this podcast, your AI will talk to my AI and we'll just both log on, right? It'll take all the menial tasks out of the way, but it will also learn so much more about you that becomes part of your digital footprint. So in the world of advertising, for example, you won't necessarily have to make an advert. You can AI an advert. So that whole big thing of doing one. So you've got an advert that could be great for you, Roger, that looks at, it will learn about you and one will learn about me. And in the advert that's created for you, it will have, your holiday pictures. So if you've just been on holiday to Italy and you've worn a wonderful, colorful shirt, the character in the advert will be in Italy wearing a colorful shirt, but also holding a latest iPhone. And that will automatically feed your ego. And mine will be slightly different and it will feed my ego. And everybody will start to see images of themselves constantly. And they will think that's what the world is. And it's essentially going to drive this idea of an ever smaller, smaller echo chamber, essentially. And it becomes harder and harder to see beyond that echo chamber because all we see is versions of ourselves. Now, if you if you created that AI bot, an advertising company would bite your hand off and buy it straight away because it would be so effective. It'd be amazing, right? Everybody has their own adverts all tailored to them. And an advertising company would argue this is just the next generation of targeted adverts. You don't want to see plain shirts, you want to see flowery shirts. Why would you show you plain shirts?
Thank
It's
you.
pointless.
Thank you.
Right? It's pointless. Why would you want to see a shirt like this? But you extend that idea further, and that all of that has been created, in my view, by the extension of psychology and cognition combining with sophisticated digital systems around AI and targeting. Right? You then combine that in the realm of politics, and suddenly you have a campaign which knows what your values are, knows what your moral code is, knows what you like and what you don't like, and a campaign that's targeted entirely at you, which is different to the one that is targeted at me. So you no longer have a party that necessarily stands for something. You have a party that creates the most compelling campaign for you and the most compelling campaign for me. So what it does is it just feeds our ego ever more so that it's buying our time and buying our vote. And the one thing that the AI is incredibly good at doing is being compelling. It is very, very, very compelling. So this combination of it being quite a compelling tool, whilst also feeding our sense of sort of narcissistic, ego-driven behaviors, is probably the most worrying element I see.
Thank you. I can see that. As you were describing that, I was thinking again how narcissism and the ego is very much a Western thing. As you know, in other cultures, particularly Asian cultures, the community is seen as more important than the individual. And, I think we've recognized that in moral philosophy for quite a long time. And I just put down something, I don't know if you like this, but in the West, we believe in ego, and in the East, they believe in we go. I don't think I'll
I like that.
trademark that.
I like it.
So, thank you.
In the world of anthropology, we have the individual and the dividual, but it's not nearly as
Love
catchy.
that.
It's not nearly as
Well,
catchy as the ego and the we go.
we go. Yeah, Ollie, I'm loving this. We will come back to the future towards the end of our chat, but in the interim, I just want to ask how anthropologists, business anthropologists, and ethnography can help us uncover hidden biases in AI. And you already mentioned the Western bias, but can you think of other biases that are hidden away in AI in all probability? Some we know about, but some we've yet to discover.
It's a good question. In terms of biases, I mean, beyond the sort of the Western egocentric version versus the sort of Eastern egocentric versions, I think that there are other elements that I think are important around sort of trust and authenticity. And I think that where you get you like so how trust to a large degree is also about your sense of your relationship to authority, and whether you are, some cultures are far more deferential to authority. They believe that the place that they are born into, and they believe that other people have achieved a status which means that they should be listened to. And that might come through hard work and effort, or it might come through, the way, the caste or the class that you were born into. But nonetheless, that place in society, knowing your place in society, I suspect AI has the opposite kind of moral viewpoint and the opposite bias, which is to cut through what it is to be deferential, and to cut through this idea that your sense of authority has come with effort, hard work, and time, because it empowers you to achieve the immediate. And there's people who think that AI is the great leveler. So everybody has access to AI, therefore they can achieve everything and anything. They can get rich quick, they can hack every system, they can do well on the stock market. Um, in reality, the opposite is true. The more money you have
Absolutely.
to invest in AI, the more likely you are to be able to make money out of AI. The everyman on the street's access to AI is so minimal and useless that it actually does not help them at all. It nonetheless, and I think this is the way, this is the moral standpoint of LLMs and the way that they've been created, is that they offer you a get rich quick. They offer you a challenge to authority. They offer you the ability to achieve anything at your fingertips and to be able to do that immediately. So I think that that's probably another bias that's built into a lot of the LLMs that we don't necessarily look at very much.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'd like to move now on to some of your research with Ipsos and the questions of public trust and perception of AI. So what do Ipsos global surveys tell us about how much people actually trust AI? And I guess there's a continuum, there's a variance around that, depending where you are in the world. Maybe you, as whether or not you are deferential or independent.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I I don't have the latest stats on that, sadly. I know that usage of AI has plateaued. I know I also know from a lot of qualitative work that we've done, a lot of people aren't really using AI on an everyday level. So there's a lot of people who it's just completely passing by. And then I suspect it's going to follow the same kind of social media pattern, which is um, 90% of the people are aware of it, 9% of people comment on it, and 1% are creators or like actually doing something with it.
Mm.
So it'll probably follow a slightly similar model to that. One of the things that we have looked at from a kind of anthropological level is is how you sort of, which is about kind of, it's got an element of trust to it, is how you train your AI and how your AI speaks to you. So you're more likely to trust something that doesn't challenge you very much. So that's the first sort of point. AI rarely challenges you. If you ask it to challenge you, it does it in a very meek manner, to be quite honest. So it's not really trying to do that. So it's almost got a kind of a trust trick built into it where it's going to sort of help you. And as a result, I think people feel quite comfortable. I think people trust it quite quickly the more that they use it because they are quite happy to train it, knowing that it will help you and it will pay off in the future. So we've seen some of that and you see that in workplaces actually. So in organizations historically, people have invested time in training people and that's takes time, right? It's not straightforward. You tell someone something once, they might well forget it. They might well do it wrong. They might well misinterpret your suggestion, and that's all part of normal life. And you accept that to be absolutely fine until you've got an alternative where you can train something that doesn't forget and it does understand your commands because it's learned how you speak and what you want to do. So there's a worry in terms of training future generations, which I know is an obvious one for AI, but I think that AI makes it easier to be trained than humans do. So whilst AI is probably cheaper than a junior workforce, which is why we tend to train AI, and I worry for the junior workforce people in the junior level coming in. It's also the way that we train AI becomes quite easy. So I think that's a slightly problematic element for the future as well.
Mm. In terms of the cultural differences, and we would explored how there are difference in many moral codes around the world. So let's assume that translates into how we define ethical AI around the world in different communities. Let's take an example of that of ethical AI. Do you think, or which public communities do you think believe that AI will make life fairer or less fair? I hope that's not too obtuse a question. But fairness and equity is obviously one of the core
Yeah.
issues that we face today in terms of global poverty and overconsumption and all of that stuff. Do you
So
think it's a leveler or not?
personally, no. I think so for a lot of these things where I'm going to sound slightly elitist, I don't mean to, but where a lot of the public believes something that isn't necessarily, that's quite a complicated debate where the world of climate change and sustainability is an incredibly complicated debate, but it's become a very simple set of memes, to be quite honest. It's like,
Mm,
fly less and recycle more. Great. No, it's actually far more complicated than that. And actually, we have this thing called the believe true gap, that we believe certain things are very, very important, but what the truth is actually quite different. With AI, I think a lot of the public believe it is a great leveler because they believe everybody has access to the same information. And the truth of it is that it's how you use it and the ways that you can apply it to different systems that's going to be the same. So I absolutely don't believe it's a great leveler at all, but I think that people believe it. And I find that quite problematic, if I'm honest.
yeah, indeed.
There's another point that I think is quite interesting, though, on a kind of cross-cultural level, which is how quickly people are likely to create new use cases. So I like to think of cultures. So there's one dimension of culture that you can apply to various different parts of the world. It's that how open or closed to change a culture is. And so some cultures are famously open to change. They want to take anything on and they adapt it and they move on. Some very, very closed. They're quite traditional, quite conservative, don't like change too much. They want to try something, test and learn, test and learn, test and learn. Japan is quite a conservative place, right? They will try new things, but they don't want to take things on wholesale. They will stick with a lot of traditional practices whilst also adopting technology. Just next door, China, massively open to change, so excited by anything that comes their way. I do think cultures that are more open to change are probably going to find more use cases for AI and new technologies as a result, because they are simply going, and that again, the openness to change has an implicit trust measurement within it. Implicitly, being able to take something on means that you trust it on some level that it's not going to go wrong, that something good's going to happen to it. Um, and whenever I start talking about the future, my first inclination is to then go and look at what's happening in China, because
Mm,
everything that seems to be happening in China comes down the line to us sort of 4 or 5 years later, to be honest. They didn't necessarily have access to LLMs before the Western world, but they had access to enormous network of a large amount of AI and systems that had benefited from machine learning far, far before we did, that was also then operationalized into other things. Like I remember going to China and I could order my weekly groceries and it would arrive within half an hour of pressing click. And that was like 5, 6 years ago. That was pre-pandemic. We're only just getting to that space in the UK today.
mm.
And that's a level of sort of operational sort of technology with operations that means they're just willing to try something new, see how we can do it there, see how we can do it there. But I think I'd be watching China to see how they start applying it.
Great answer. Thank you. I want to ask one question about responsibility, governance, safe AI. And the question is this: what can anthropologists and business anthropologists, how can they help and inform governments and regulators and the tech firms themselves and other firms in terms of the way that we need to use this particular technology in a safe and responsible way? What can you offer that you think they're really not getting yet?
I mean, it's a very good question, and I think that this is a classic moment where the authorities, uh, I feel for them. It's hard to play catch up on an industry that's moving that fast. Um, there's obviously some sort of key principles as part of it. As anthropologists, as researchers, as data ethicists, I think that the first place that we need to go to is an understanding of informed consent. So
Mm.
are people informed enough for their data to be used in various different ways? And it's very difficult because you download an app that says it will, you take a photo of me and you will then turn me face into a pug or a wolf and you go, yes, 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 click, this will be great fun. Accept. You've just gone through a process of informed consent whereby you have given your facial data to an app for all sorts of things that you haven't even bothered reading about. And that's because the people who've designed the app have designed it because they want to do something, well, probably two things. A, they want to turn your face into a dog's face because they think that's fun and playful and you might download lots of it and they can sell some advertising through the app. And secondly, they actually want to harness your data because they'll make money from the data as well. Um, so they make that process of informed consent almost assumed. You still have to click yes, I give up my consent, but they've always made it assumed. Technology's done this for years and years and years and years. I think that there's been a this isn't necessarily AI related, but it's technology related. There's been a recent development in the UK through accessing porn, where porn you could go onto a porn site with everything and anything on it. And all you had to do was say that you were 18 or over. Click a button, say you were 18 or over. I mean, what kind of verification is that? And recently, the online laws came into place where you actually have to verify your age. Now, the age verification process is still weak, it's still poor, but at least it's a barrier. At least it's an attempt to go, we are actually trying to make this a place of safety rather than a place of assumed consent. I think that that's one thing that the authorities need to catch up with. The second thing, and I would say this, is that I think that it's very easy to get swept up with new developments and assume that the public are aware of all of these things. We've done lots of work for the Information Commissioner's Office in the UK, which really shows that people aren't aware of all of these different things. They're not aware of the development of AI. They're not aware of how it's used in social media, and they're not aware of how it's operating in the background. And they're not aware of what they're consenting to by logging onto these sites. So I think that a lot of the authorities need to slightly get out of their bubble and go and meet people. And a lot of them do, right? The Information Commissioner's Office has commissioned us in order to do this. So they are thinking about it, but they really can't do it enough, because when they realize that the level of understanding, knowledge and behavior is where it is, it's at such a low level, they've got to act a bit sort of in a stronger sense, I would say.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great point about informed consent. And it reminds us all when we're asking to agree to terms and conditions, whoever reads them.
Yeah.
And the large language models now, some of the biggest ones, are now saying you still own your data. We're not changing that, but we can use it however we like. And it's embedded deep in there, and everyone's clicking, I agree. I just want to ask a question about human qualities, which AI can simulate, but we know at this stage do not have the capacity to feel. And that's, for example, empathy, compassion. As an anthropologist, do you think, well, what human qualities that we consider human can be taught to an AI, and it can do more than simulate it? Do you think there's anything there?
So in anthropology, we talk about embodied intelligence. So it's kind of like your instincts, but through your bodies, your gestures, your emotions, your sensory cues, your smell, all of these kinds of things. Your intelligence isn't purely cognitive. And, a 4-year-old can recognize danger, love, compassion, laugh, like cheekiness, all these kinds of things incredibly well without any words being spoken. And that level of embodied intelligence is something that I actually worry that that we're starting to place less emphasis on. So if you remember these heady pre-pandemic days when we all used to meet in person, wasn't that wild? I remember when so I have a team of 20 odd people, and we used to obviously had to go and meet on Teams and Zoom and other places like that. And one of my roles as head of the team is to create excitement. You want to lead people, you want to get people excited about a new idea, and you get people on board by going, look, I know this is new and weird and odd, but honestly, I really believe in this. It's going to be great. And doing that in a room compared to doing that on Zoom is so different. The
Mm.
first thing I noticed is that suddenly, or I had these I had to sort of pull out these old acting skills that I may or may not have had. And I was becoming far more elaborate on the screen. I was waving my hands around a lot more. I was far more like my voice would go up and down a lot more. I changed the way that I behaved in order to attempt to sort of ram a whole load of emotion through the screen to other people so that they could receive my emotion. And it was still quite half-hearted and everyone going, yeah, okay, fine, I'll do it. You get people in a room, all you have to do is stand at the front, your eyes open slightly wider, big smile, and people already start to feel the energy. And it's that kind of emotion it's that kind of embodied intelligence, to be honest, because it's not just the transmitting, it's the receiving and it's the reading of it that I think AI will struggle with for an awful long time. And so I went for lunch with an old friend the other day, and she was asking me about work and stuff. And there was something missing as well. And she was just a bit coy, and there was something about it. And it was lunch. It was a small table just for the two of us. And I said, have you got a new job? Why are you asking me these questions? And she went, I can't tell anyone. I can't tell anyone at all. It's a secret because they haven't said yes, but I think they will. I went for an and it all came sort of blurting out. I wouldn't have been able to read that on Zoom, let alone an AI reading that from even when we start sort of moving into video AI. Right? So there's a lot of stuff around embodied intelligence that we are starting to forget, I think, as humans, because we've moved so much online in terms of our video interactions, and we've moved so much online in terms of everything that we do, and without relying so much on AI that this becomes the system and the model that we work with. Therefore, embodied intelligence sort of gets shoved to the side a little bit, but it's still really important.
Indeed. One last question before we wrap up. I want you to look in your crystal ball, but in a hopeful way. As an anthropologist, what do you hope will be the future relationship between individual humans, tribes of humans, and artificial intelligence?
I hope that we will realize that we need to see difference. And I hope that AI will provide us with a way of connecting with people on a very deep and emotional level with people who come from very, very different places to us, and they teach
Mhm.
us something. So this is what happens when we get on aeroplanes and go and see other countries. This is what happens when I meet colleagues of mine who work in India, who work in China, who work in Singapore, who work in Brazil. I still get that. Like, so Zoom is still quite good for that. I can see other people and they can show me around their houses and I can see how they're living. And from the comfort of my own home, I can still see difference. It's not as good as going, but it's still pretty good. There's an organization called the Human Library who specialize in helping organizations break out of their echo chambers by organizing a series of conversations with people that are fundamentally unlike them.
Mm.
And I think that they're getting great traction and people are loving it because it's showing what's going on at the fringes of society. So I we are quite good at knowing and seeing what mainstream culture looks like. AI currently perpetuates that. It currently drives more and more mainstream thinking. It has the opportunity and the possibility to actually sort of flick the algorithm to a large degree to show us what's going on at the fringes of society and at the fringes of cultures, and also at cultures that feel like they are fringe to us. Because it knows us so well, it should also be able to know how to teach us how to learn new things. There's
Sounds great.
I mean, I would love it if that happens.
That's wonderful. Ollie, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure in talking with you. That was Oliver Sweet of Ipsos, helping us to see how understanding people might just be the key to building ethical AI. Ollie, you've given me 4 key takeaways. Number 1 is cyborgs. We have been cyborgs for an awful long time, and that's a new one on me. I love your distinction between therapy bots, which are generally safer, to companion bots, which stoke our narcissism. I love that. The point you made just now about AI has no embodied intelligence, I actually think that is going to be the biggest challenge for its development. Maybe it's a good thing that it won't have embodied intelligence. Or can we link the first point to this point, which is the cyborg point? I don't know. We'll wait and see. And then finally, your last point about your hope, which is that AI will help us see the richness of our diversity across all the cultures that we have at the moment, and perhaps also what we all share in common as human beings. So, Ollie, thanks again. You've been a great guest.
Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful host. These have been great questions and really made me think and challenge some of my thinking as well. So thank you, Roger.
Well, you're very welcome. And I have always enjoyed working both with anthropologists and psychologists. And there's a pub joke there about an anthropologist, a psychologist, and a philosopher go into a bar, but I can't remember that. I'll have to make up a line for that. So, dear listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe, and join us again on ChatRog soon, where we explore not just what artificial intelligence can do, but what it should be doing. Thank you and goodbye. So, Ollie, just to finish off this podcast, I've actually asked my AI to come up with a joke about an anthropologist, a psychologist, and a philosopher walk into a bar. The anthropologist observes how everyone intuitively forms social hierarchies. The psychologist notes it's all rooted in childhood attachment styles. The philosopher just asks, but does the bar even exist? The bartender sighs. This is why I only serve drinks to engineers. Well, it generated it in a nanosecond.
Yeah.
It can do better, but it's not bad. I would love a comedian to do better and let us know.
Yeah. As part of writing my book, what I wanted to do, because I talk a lot about the battle between culture and cognition, in that we often do things for cultural reasons, but we think that it's for a cognitive reason. And at the beginning of every chapter, I have a joke, which is culture and cognition walk into a bar. Culture and cognition walk into a bar. They sit down, and cognition studies the menu, the cocktail menu, looks up and down which ingredients he likes, doesn't like, eventually looks at the barman, figures out if he's going to make a good cocktail or whether he should just go for a beer, and eventually points to the one on the menu and says, I'll have that one. And culture looks over and says, I'll have what he's having.